The next speaker is someone who has by-hearted every table that you know, and she went on to become a chartered accountant. She is a person who is known for financial integrity and excellence. As a family, they're involved in holistic development of the marginalized communities. They're doing some terrific work. She's written a beautiful book. I'm not sure whether she's carrying copies here, but if you like to read that book, Enjoy Money God's Way. I'm talking about the one and only Manju George. Can we please put our hands together for Manju George as she comes up on stage, and she's going to probably teach you some maths and also share her story. Manju.
Perhaps you are thinking that my life is insignificant. I'm just drifting. Why am I going through all this mess? Believe me, a day is coming when you are going to look back at your life and be amazed at the way the Lord has molded you. I'm standing here and you're listening to me because I've got some years to my credit, or maybe to my debit, And I can see to some extent what God has been doing, the way He's been molding me through the ups and downs of life. I believe each of us here have a story to tell, a unique and a powerful story, because God is our story maker. Let me take you back to the mind of a 12-year-old who looks at a board like this. What do you think is going to come into their mind? Boring, no color, lacks creativity. The last thing I want my board to look like. But you know what? At age 12, I said, wow, chartered accountant. I don't know what it means, but that's what I want to be. In 10 years' time, by the time I was 22, I was a chartered accountant. Now, for those of you who do not know, it's a very difficult course to pass. It's about 5 to 10% of the people who pass that exam. And I discovered that God puts dreams into our hearts, and if we pursue after it, He will fulfill it. He can make the impossible possible, because it was an impossible state. While I was dreaming these big dreams, I had no interest in studies. And when I was doing my standard 10 exam, my ICSE exam, I was 14 years old, I was sure I was going to fail. Because just 2 months before that, at the pre-boards, I had failed in at least 3 subjects. And nothing much changed after that. But I was terrified. You know why? Because in our culture, when people are considered, students are considered to be very good students till they write their first public exam. And then the marks go public, literally. Everybody, friends and family, get to hear how bad you've done. And I just could not imagine the shame I would go through if I failed. So you know what I did? I fasted and prayed. And I said, God, I am sorry, but give me a first class. What audacity, isn't it? But you know what? God is a good God. I got exactly 60%, 360 marks, not a mark more, not a mark less. Now, if any of you are getting ideas of how to write your exam, please don't take this clue. It's a very bad idea. But I'm sharing this story to tell you that this was the beginning of my quest for purpose. And I discovered that God is able to use our mess and our inadequacies to lead us into a life of purpose. And so I moved on. I did my standard 12 very well. I actually got a state rank. And then I went on to do my CA entrance at a time when most people did not even know that you could do your chartered accountancy after your standard 12. And I finished my entrance, and I was all set to make a career as a chartered accountant. But then I was very disturbed in my spirit. I was saying, okay, I'm going to study hard, and I'm going to become a chartered accountant. I'm going to get a great job, make a lot of money, marry a rich guy, have children, and then die. I mean, what's the purpose of all this? This is not what I want to do. And at that time, friends of mine introduced me to a personal relationship with Jesus. That he died instead of me, and that I have a place in eternity. And that changed the way I looked at life. I said, now I'm going to, live as though I'm a citizen of heaven, and everything I do, I will live that citizenship out on this earth, be a witness in preparation for eternity with God. And so, with that purpose in mind, I made a deep commitment that I will live a life of integrity and excellence. I said, I'm going to obey the Bible to the extent I understand. I was age 16 at that time. And I said, I will walk a life of integrity, and I will follow the example of excellence that the Word of God teaches me. And now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I lived a saint happily ever after. I didn't. It's far from it. Even today, I have to remind myself about these truths. But the fact that every time I make a mistake, which is ever so often, the fact that Jesus has already paid the price, gives me the freedom to rise up and get moving. So as I got on to try and live my life this way, there were 3 realities that I had to face, which I want to share with you. Number 1, God lays the ground at work and at home. Now, as a chartered accountant, I was just fascinated when I was studying for it to be in practice, where I would do audits, consulting, business consulting, etc. But then very soon I realized that if I'm going to walk a life of integrity, it's going to be almost impossible to practice. And so at that time, I met with a senior chartered accountant, and I asked him this question: is it possible to practice with the biblical principles that I would like to? And he said no. He said, no, it's not possible the way you are talking about. And he also went on to say that I've heard of only one firm, and they are in Mumbai, who do their practice the way you are talking about. So I was very disappointed. I gave up all hopes of having my own business of practice, because practice helps me to be creative, to do new things every day, and that was like so exciting. But I said, okay, Lord, I give this hope up, and started looking at different other options. In the meantime, I got married and moved to Bangalore. And miraculously, I met with Mr. Raja Singh. He was a committed Christian and a practicing chartered accountant. And when he heard about my passion, he said, come join our firm, and we will show you how you can practice with integrity and excellence and be successful and make money. And I'll recommend that you watch him on LeadTalks. He spoke on this very platform last year, where he shared his story. Back home, I realized that if we should be able to, achieve our purpose, we need to have a good support from our family. And so at a very young age, I would pray for a good husband. Young people, take note. I would pray for a good husband, and God brought Saju into my life. He is my cheerleader, my encourager. He's the one who prod me on to my fullest with the capacities, and he's my prayer partner. And but for him, I would not be here today. And I learned this big lesson that God is the one who prepares the ground for us. And if we are willing to stay on in that ground, He will bring things to fulfillment, and it will be beautiful. The second reality I learned is that there is a cost to pay. Now, the decision that I took that I will not be in practice was a cost I had to pay if I were to walk a life of integrity and excellence. But of course, God had other plans, but that was a cost I had to pay. Going to a government office several times instead of paying a bribe and getting the work done quickly is a cost to pay. There was a time when, because I didn't give in to the demands of a government department, they try to frame me with false accusations. A cost to pay again. There are areas of practice where we choose not to be in because of the corruption in those departments. Again, a cost to pay. There are times when, as a consultant, when you give advice, most of the time, the advice could turn around into business for us. More billing for us. And to be cautious all the time, to put the interest of my clients before my own interest, and be vigilant about it, is again a cost to pay. And when we choose to walk in integrity and excellence, it's not, people around us are not really happy. We think we're going to be applauded for it. But you know what? It comes with pain and accusation. And so there are several times when we have to go through pain and accusation, but you remember I said, I committed to say, no matter what, I'm going to walk in integrity and excellence. It doesn't matter what the cost is, because my eyes are on eternity. And that's where I will get my reward. The third reality I had to learn was that God is the one who is our helper. In order to be able to fulfill every one of these things, the wisdom, the knowledge, the counsel, and all of this comes from the Lord. People ask me, can you give me a formula on how I can run my business, without paying bribes, etc. And believe me, there is no formula. If you stay committed, you will see how God will show up. And you know what? I want to give you a simple example of how God showed up. I had a case of a client who needed a government registration. And my staff kept going to the government office several times, and it just was not getting done. And so I had to go there personally. And as I went to the reception and I asked to meet the officer, my eyes fell on a board. Mind you, it wasn't happening because they were asking for a bribe. My eyes fell on a board which said, if anyone asks you for a bribe, contact so-and-so vigilance department. I got an idea. I pulled out my notebook and my pen, and I made sure everyone's looking at me, and I started pretended to be scribbling something down. Within 2 minutes, I had someone come to me and say, "Sir's waiting for you, will you see him?" And in a week, we got the registration. Why am I sharing this? It's such a simple idea that God gave me, and we got our work done. Just because we stay committed, you will see how God will show up. I testify that as we commit to no compromises, be willing to pay the price, the favor of God brings us success and protects us like a shield. So, as I started my practice and moved on, I was again disturbed inside of me. Okay, so I was working in this firm, I was again disturbed of me. Because as I was thinking about what I'm doing, audit, business consulting, tax advice, and I said, God, does all this matter in eternity? I don't want to do things that don't matter in eternity. And so I shut myself in a room for 3 days and I said, God, speak to me about this. I do not want to be doing things that do not matter in eternity. And you know what? God said at the end of it, the world systems, those of you in the marketplace, please note, the world systems, trade and commerce are part of God's plan, and my purpose in it is to contribute to it. And it was so exciting that all good work is sacred. And so it gave me a totally different perspective to say that if I'm going to be doing tax advice, tax consultancy, business consulting, audits, I'm doing it all unto God, and it is part of God's plan. And that was really exciting. It gave me a new purpose. And I realized that what it says in Ephesians, that we are His workmanship, created in His image to do good works, which He has prepared in advance for us to do, became a reality. That whatever I do, I would do it unto Him, because this is a good work that He has prepared for me. And my purpose then became more focused where I said, Lord, use me to bring financial integrity in the lives and work of people. Now, just to backtrack, as I told you, we moved to Bangalore, got married and moved to Bangalore. And the obvious thing for me to do was to go to Christian organizations and say, I will work with you. So I went to this prominent national Christian leader and I said, sir, I'm a chartered accountant. I'm willing to work for your organization. I don't care what you pay me. And he said, okay, let me think about it. I will come back to you. No internet, no mobiles those days. I got a letter from him after 1 month and he said, you are overqualified. We cannot take you. You know what? They were not ready for a chartered accountant in their department, leave alone a lady. And the best part is, in 2 months' time, I went back to that organization, this time as the auditor. And can you imagine the impact that an individual in a finance department can make versus the auditor? In 3 to 5 years, I was able to bring in great financial improvement in their financial systems, not because they were doing anything wrong, but just because of a lack of proper advice. I was narrow in my thinking. Here I was offering free service to someone. But God's plan for our sphere of influence is much larger than we can ever ask or imagine. And He needs no help from us. Okay? So, what God has planned is just beyond our imagination. So, integrity, the biggest lesson I learned on integrity was from another incident. And that was very, very important. There was a client of mine. I was very involved in their conceptualization of their business and setting up their business, in getting them started. And I was so personally involved, and I believe I did an excellent job, a faithful job. But after they got set up, they chose to change me as their advisor. And it really hurt me. It pained me a lot. And I said, God, did you not say you're going to use me to serve people? Why did this happen? Now, after about 10 years, the managing director of that company came back to me. And he said, we have a very serious tax scrutiny case with a large tax demand. The advice we have is either we pay up this tax for which we have no money, or we pay a bribe, which we will not do. Would you argue this case for us? Or, he said, you keep the company. And so I took the matter home because of the urgency. And before I started, I prayed. And I knew that the Lord was telling me that if you forgive them, I will give you success. Oh my, it was like, integrity and excellence alone is not enough for a follower of Christ. God is looking at our heart. That was a big eye-opener because you need to have excellence. I could have just said we won't pay bribes, but if you do not know how to argue the case, there's no use. So you need to have integrity and excellence, which I believe that people of other faiths also have. But as a follower of Christ, we need to have our heart in the right place as well. And so I learned this big lesson that integrity demands that what I say and what I do align with my heart. What I say and what I do should be what I'm thinking and believing. I can't believe one thing and say one thing and do something else. Why? Because God sees it through. And the Bible says, do all things in love. Now, I am not by default a love person. I'm just get it done person. So, it's difficult, but I know with Christ it is possible. As we, like I said, as we moved into Bangalore, the opportunities that we saw in Bangalore, the glamour of the booming IT world, the call from, being able to migrate abroad, the temptations from all of these were real. And it was at that point of time, God was also asking us to make a big financial sacrifice. And we learned that money is just a God-given tool to fulfill God-given purposes in our life. Everything that we need for life's purpose, I believe God has given us already. Everything in terms, what I mean is in terms of money, everything that we need, God will provide. And we need not run here and there in order to do that. But the danger is that this same tool can become something that will take us away from the purposes of God. Money can take us away from the purposes of God. The reason I want to emphasize this is I see so often today that people choose on moving jobs and going to different places on the basis of how much more money they will make. And I believe that it can hinder the purpose that God has for us if we're going to take our decisions on the basis of money. And that's a big lesson we learned. But I'll tell you something. I stand to testify that we lack nothing. In fact, our income and our wealth went up several-fold. God is a good God. And as we learned these lessons, we were able to take it out and share and teach on personal finance management like Joshua already told you. I'm almost more than half my life on this earth. And I'm excited to see how God is going to fulfill His purpose in my life. How He's going to unfold what else He has for me and in the lives of my children, as they are the legacy I'll leave behind. As I go off stage now, can I ask you all to look at your own life and reflect on where you stand? Do you have dreams? Would you bring your dreams to the Lord? Would you bring your mess to the Lord? Would you bring the inadequacies that you feel about yourself to the Lord? Reflect on your life, because God must be doing something. Be conscious about it. There is a purpose, like we said, a good work that God has prepared in advance for you to do. Would you redeem that purpose? I said, reflect on your life, redeem your purpose. And thirdly, would you resolve to walk a life of integrity and excellence? God bless.
Wow, that was just fantastic, isn't it? How many of us here, I picked up 2 points from what Manju was sharing. Point number 1, she chose not to immigrate to another country, just like what Nathan was sharing. He chose to come back from Canada. And here is a person who chose to be in India and to serve our very own country. And secondly, she's talking about integrity, about no bribes. How many of us here are willing to take up that challenge? Our country is ranking, in the top corrupt countries. And I think as every patriotic Indian should do, we should all take this resolve that we will not bribe anybody. Can I hear an amen for that? All right, thank you so much, Manju. Can we put our hands together? I'm going to request our co-team members, Raja and Jessica, and they're going to come over and give this lovely caricature to Manju. It says, Manju George, number cruncher. Can we put our hands together once again for our number cruncher, Manju George?